Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome back to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
This week we'll be talking about tensions within Speaker Johnson's party, an appropriations update, and the latest on Texas. After that, we'll have an interview with multiple members at Media Row and an update of our lives on the Hill.
Welcome back. We are here in the studio. How exciting.
Thank God.
And there are 2 weeks left of December, so there's a lot of things to do. The House is back, the Senate is back, the White House is kicking. And I think that what is so interesting right now is that we're finding ourselves in that end of the year scruffle again, where everybody just has different priorities.
Mm-hmm. Tensions are flying.
Tensions are flying.
We're seeing it with Speaker Johnson, with people in his caucus. We're seeing it with the Department of War. We're just seeing it in a lot of places.
Everywhere. Everyone's kind of just upset with each other, and I think that's coming off of the government shutdown, which really isolated Democrats and Republicans from these working relationships. We have seen a bridge of that with the ongoing debate of healthcare, the healthcare credits that a little bit. They're expiring at the end of December, and so you're seeing a small coalition of Republicans and Democrats coming together. But largely, the parties seem to be kind of just on the outskirts, giving each other the eye a little bit after the shutdown, because each blamed each other for that record-breaking time frame.
Yeah.
And I think, though, what's kind of not great for Republicans right now is that those tensions that are flowing between the parties are now kind of seeping into the conference.
Which is hard because Speaker Johnson has anywhere from a 1 to 3 seat majority given the day or the week or when a special election is.
Yeah.
And so when you have a 1-2 seat majority, that is, if there's one member mad at you, and most likely if one member is mad about something, they have a friend that is probably mad about it as well.
Yeah.
And that immediately sinks whatever bill they want to do, or it builds a coalition of tensions against the speaker, which we saw it last week with Elise Stefanik. We saw it with a discharge petition with a ban for congressional stock trading. I know that GOP leadership is largely against not only that discharge petition, but all discharge petitions.
Yeah.
And so there's just been tension there. A lot of Republicans have been signing on to the discharge petition. So once that hits 218 signatures, that'll force yet another vote.
On a bill that leadership doesn't want.
Which I want to note that neither leadership wants it.
Democrats don't want it either.
Yeah, because it does. So a lot of people, obviously, I think that most people around the U.S. do believe in a stock trade ban for congressional members, which means it bans them from trading stocks and inside trading. But
which is, I think, also for people who don't even really know what stock trading is, because I didn't know that really either before I came to the Hill. But I think the biggest argument here is that what people say is that members have this insider knowledge because they're on committees or they're talking with, K Street and all these economic, moguls that are able to give them insight into what's going to happen in the markets. And so a lot of them are able to make quite a considerable amount of money, whether it's them or their family members.
Yeah.
And so the argument is that they get all of this knowledge that regular people don't.
Yeah.
And so why should they have an edge? And so, I think that that's why you're seeing not only a bipartisan coalition of Democrats and Republicans who want this ban. You're seeing AOC and Anna Paulina Luna on the same stage, which you don't normally see that. But they are both really adamant about banning this. But then you have other Democrats and Republicans on both sides who are very anti this ban.
A lot of them do make a lot of money from it. I mean, members of Congress, they make about $177,000 a year, which when you break it down, yes, that is much more than the average American. But they are having to live in 2 places. They're paying rent in 2 places. A lot of them have kids. A lot of their spouses can't work because they are going back and forth and they just don't have the time to be there for their kids like parents necessarily need to be. And so a lot of them, to go back to the argument for allowing members to trade stocks, a lot of them are arguing that this is a form of income and that if a lot of members aren't allowed to have this form of income, you'll lose a lot of good congressional candidates because a lot of people won't run if they can't.
And that's a fair argument because candidate quality, we've talked about that before. Candidate quality is a big issue that both parties have.
Yes.
And so if, that's what it comes down to is them being able to have this amount of money to run these campaigns. I think that though a lot of people are still that does suck, but also, you're a member and you get this privilege of being in the halls.
Yeah.
You get the privilege of seeing information before anyone else does. And if you're there to work for the people, why should you get this extra, step ahead? And so
it's been a big contingency for a really long time. I know that whenever people a lot of times think about a congressional stock trade ban, Nancy Pelosi is the first person that comes to mind. But she's not even the number one trader in Congress. I would like to point that out because she is always the go-to example, which Don't get me wrong, she's made a ton of money.
Ton of cash.
Stock trading. But she's not the worst of them, and there are plenty of members
on both sides
that they don't want to give up those stocks that they have. They don't want to give up that stuff. That is a large chunk of money that they're either going to have to hand off to a blind trust or do such and such with it. And so it does make for a hard vote for a lot of these members who have a lot of money in stocks, which therefore in turn is a terrible look whenever they go back to their constituents next year to campaign. So that's why leadership on both sides have struggled with putting any bill like this on the floor. It's been a bill that's been introduced every Congress since I've covered Congress. So that's kind of where the tension is. So it'll be really interesting to see if that discharge petition hits 218. Obviously, Anna Paulina Luna introduced one earlier this year, and her and Johnson came to an agreement on something else. So we'll see if there's another agreement here if she does reach that. But I do think she's pretty fired up about this, and she has a good coalition backing her.
And she's not the only Republican that we saw last week who kind of took a shot at Johnson. Johnson was having a rough week last week, that's for sure. And I think the biggest one that kind of, I don't want to say it came out of nowhere. I guess I'll talk about it first. So Elise Stefanik.
There's been some tension.
There's been some tension. So Elise Stefanik, who is a New York congresswoman, she's running for governor, or she's trying to be the Republican candidate for governor.
Yes.
She came out and basically blamed Johnson for blocking this provision that would be inserted into the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a long way to it. It's just an annual defense bill. We pass it every fiscal year. It's usually bipartisan. So
that a lot of stuff gets added on to.
A lot of stuff gets added on. A lot of policy riders, and that's where you get a lot of problems with members who don't like a certain policy rider or they hate that theirs wasn't included. And so in her case, hers was not included. And she blamed Johnson for getting rolled, quote unquote, by Democrats. And so when that happened, instead of, which this is the argument that Johnson had been making all of last week, instead of like picking up the phone to call him and be like, hey, I'm mad about this, let's talk, she just took to social media and blasted the crap out of him. Like, kept saying that like he was getting rolled by Democrats, that he was lying, that he wasn't communicating through the media, but not with her. And then you have Johnson, who is just like, I have no idea what's going on with her. She could call me. I think we have a misunderstanding of the facts, like basically telling her that she's wrong. And it was kind of funny because you don't normally see a member of Republican conference attacking their own speaker. And it's even more rare to see a member of leadership attacking their leader, because Elise Stefanik is chairwoman of Republican leadership. Albeit that's kind of like a made-up role, to be quite honest. But
which, to be fair, so backstory on any frustration that Elise Stefanik has,
it's been a long time coming.
It has. She was nominated to be on Trump's, in Trump's administration. The nomination was pulled whenever a lot of Signalgate stuff like that went down.
And also because of the margins, like we've talked about. Like Johnson has a slim margin, and so her nomination was pulled because they were like, if we get rid of you, then that's one less vote we have for big things like reconciliation or appropriations.
Until her special election would have been, which would have been in the hands of a Democratic governor whom she loathes. Kathy Hochul, just had to put that in there. But ever since then, there's just been, she lost her original leadership position when she went to
She's had a lot of losing.
She's had a lot of losses this year. And so I think the tension has just been building and building and building throughout this whole year. And this week was kind of when we saw it blow up. It kind of came around. She said she spoke to Johnson and to President Trump, and they found an agreement. And after that, she was like,
I'm really looking forward to working with House Republican leadership. And we were like, whoa, like what happened? And I think that what is funny about her is that she's been using her position as a member of the House as like a de facto bully pulpit for months to run for governor.
Yeah.
And so everything that she does is to put out there that she is this fiery, loud, I'm going to fight person when going up against Kathy Hochul in New York. And actually, it was funny. I was looking at some statements that she had put out, just like going through and seeing like what she's been a part of, because she kind of went under the radar after her nomination was pulled. So I was just looking, and she was sponsoring some bill for House oversight for DC. And in the DC statement, she did not talk about DC until the very end. All she talked about passing this bill was about New York. But it was a bill targeting DC. So it was just very interesting. Like, she's been using her position to basically run like the shadow campaign. And so for her to go up against Johnson, I think was to show that she's willing to go up against the establishment. She's willing to fight. But I think that also and that kind of goes into our governor's race kind of down the line, but one of the biggest disadvantages she's going to have is that she is so connected to Trump in a state that's blue, in a state that has Republican representatives. But there's going to be some work that she has to do to show that she can pull away from Trump and fight against the establishment, like she is saying that she is.
Yeah. And I mean, even with the discharge petition, we saw Stefanik sign on to Anna Paulina Luna's discharge petition. We saw Nancy Mace, who has kind of broken with the Republican leadership on the Epstein discharge petition.
Yeah.
I know that she has a meeting with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene this week, who announced her retirement, like we talked about last episode. I will be fascinated to see how that goes. She's running for governor in South Carolina, and so she won't be in the House next term regardless, but she could announce an early retirement. And I know that she said that she won't, but she is meeting with Marjorie to talk about her decision on that. I think it's really interesting to see 2 of the 3 women that were signed on to the Epstein discharge petition kind of making this move and being hesitant towards leadership or hesitant on their role in the party. It'll be interesting to see if anything happens with Boebert, because I don't think we ever expected Greene. I don't think we ever expected Mace to have this tension. And so I think what I'll be watching is if anything like that happens with Boebert after this week.
Yeah, and I think what is so interesting about that is that what you said earlier, that, if one person is upset, they can usually find a friend. They can usually find a coalition. And you're seeing right now a lot of the fights that Johnson has had to put up with this year especially have been led by women.
Yeah.
And women in the there's a smaller amount of women in the Republican conference than there are men. And so
that's just Congress.
And that's just Congress. But the women have taken such a strong standpoint, which love that. Go girls.
Yeah.
But I think it's so interesting to watch and see how all of these women are taking a stand against him in different ways. And I think it's just showing that they're kind of poking a hole in Johnson's conference, where it's not just one issue like appropriations where they can figure it out and move forward. It's like, well, you had the Epstein files, but now you also have stock trading, and now you also have, these other things that are coming up with the NDAA. Like, there's different things that Johnson has to deal with constantly, and if he keeps having these issues with members, all it's going to do is keep building and building this coalition. He already has problems with Freedom Caucus just on a regular basis, and even though they've been a little bit more amenable to Johnson than they have to other speakers in the past, I think that you're seeing it's not just the Freedom Caucus that Johnson has to worry about anymore. And I think when he became speaker, the way that it happened, he was able to kind of put Freedom Caucus in a box and be like, I know you guys are going to be an issue. I have ways to solve it. Check.
Yeah.
But I think that what he wasn't anticipating was that a lot of his other members were not going to be okay with him just constantly adhering to Freedom Caucus.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that with Luna earlier this year. She left.
Yeah. I feel like they're not feeling heard. And the top 3 Republicans in leadership are all men, and I think that these women are coming out and they're like, I've been asking for these issues to be addressed, like the stock trade ban, like proxy voting for pregnant women, like Mace with Epstein and stuff like that. I just think that these issues are building and building and building, and these women have been so outspoken about it, and they're not seeing any movement. And so I think that they're just getting frustrated that their priorities aren't being put on the front line, which there's 435 members in the House. You have to give Johnson some flexibility. He has a lot to do, and so you can't appease every member, but I think that they are just feeling unheard.
Yeah, and Stefanik used to be the House Republican Conference chairwoman, and so and people loved her. They thought that she was so effective. She was able to not only have the people in leadership who, like you said, the top 3 are men, was able to have them, have a seat at the table and be able to talk to them about stuff. Women in the conference felt like they could come to her and talk to her about stuff, and she was there and listening. I don't think that Lisa McClain has that same repertoire with the members that they did with Stefanik.
I agree.
And I think that that's something that we could dive into on a completely different show, but like McClain and Stefanik just have different approaches of doing things, and I think that Stefanik has taken this route, and you've seen it now with her becoming, chairwoman of leadership.
Yeah.
She is acting as if she's not in leadership anymore, and she's kind of breaking that barrier, and she's going with people like Luna and Mace and Greene who aren't in leadership, and they are free to say whatever they want.
Yeah.
And they've always kind of been a little bit on the outskirts, and they've felt like they could speak up and be the outsider on things. But it's very rare to see Stefanik move and do that, and so I think that she's trying to prove a point that, like, you need the women in this caucus, and if you push past them, if you ignore them, there's a whole coalition here who's ready to challenge you. Because Stefanik said in an interview with Wall Street Journal, she said, I don't think Speaker Johnson has the votes. If there was a vote called right now, with the way that people are feeling right this second, I don't think that he would be
I don't think
speaker.
anyone would, though. So
No. And so I think, and that's another thing too, like, if he's...
The margins are just so small
that
it really blurs the line on everything.
Yeah, and it's very hard to say whether or not Democrats would bail Johnson out. They did when Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to vacate him and get rid of him. Democrats bailed him out. They said it wasn't worth it. So I don't think that we'll ever get, because I had some people reach out to me and be like, oh, is like Speaker Johnson out?
I think it'd be different now, though. After the shutdown, I think that there's a lot of lack of trust. I mean, not that there wasn't before, but you saw how they have said that the relationship between Democratic and Republican leadership in the House isn't reconcilable, and I think that would be the difference now, which I'm obviously not going to say anything for sure. I think Speaker Johnson is fine through the midterms. Next year's campaign
Unless something drastically goes wrong, I think we can say that he's fine. I don't think...
Totally.
And also, like, they don't have time for a motion to vacate. They want to do reconciliation. They have a funding. And speaking of funding...
Appropriations.
That deadline is January 30th. And so it is very likely that there's going to be another CR. So it's not like we're going to pass these bills and appropriations are over for the fiscal year. They're going to keep doing, I think, CRs in the middle of an election year. And so on top of that, and then reconciliation 2.0, that they have a framework kind of for, they just don't have time to deal with all of this. And so I think with Johnson's responses last week to what was going on with his members, he was saying kind of what you said, that, I'm in the consensus building business. I need to make sure that I get every member on my side. Like, we may not have all of our priorities in there, but we all need to understand that we're working together as a family. And I think that that's a good mentality to have, and I think that he's done a good job with that. I just think that a lot of members are cautioning him that because of his small margin, he does need to watch out for the louder individuals who are ready to kind of go to toe-to-toe with him on these big matters.
Yeah. It's funny because we talk about how much they have to do with appropriations coming up in January, but then I talked to Rosa DeLauro last week, the ranking member of appropriations, and she's like, we haven't done anything. There's been no movement. She's like, I'm always optimistic, which she is an extremely optimistic ranking member.
She's so optimistic for being the appropriations ranking member. Like, I would be so pessimistic if I was in that role.
But she's like, there's been no movement. She's like, the deadline is coming up in about a month and a half, and there's no movement. So I think that with her saying that there's been no movement, that realistically, like you said, through the campaign year, it's going to be CR after CR. I'm sure that they'll get a couple of appropriations bills done, the less contentious ones. But I think that those contentious bills, like, once we hit January, that is midterm campaign season, and that is just like the stuff that doesn't end up getting hammered out.
Yeah.
I also am hesitant on a reconciliation 2.0 coming through anytime after January. Reconciliation bills are hard to get through, especially in a midterm year. So I think that all of that is just up in the air going forward.
Two things that I was thinking about while you're saying that is that, like, when it comes to reconciliation, it is a campaign year, so people are going to be in and out, going to their home states. You have a lot of members who are running for governor or running for attorney general, or they're running for Senate. And so you're going to have a lot of absences. And so with reconciliation, you're already going to have Thomas Massey voting no because he hates them. So I can pretty much guarantee he's voting no. There's at least 5 other people that made reconciliation really hard last time.
Yeah. Which I think this one will be different. It won't touch things like Medicaid, or, because I mean, they already touched that.
Yeah.
It doesn't touch a lot of, I think it'll be less contentious because it will be much smaller, which will make it easier.
Yeah.
But I still, like, with a 2-seat margin, there's a lot of things that a lot of people want that will make that extremely hard to get across the finish line.
And appropriations and reconciliation are starting to kind of come together because with appropriations, I had talked to Tom Cole last week, who's chairman of House Appropriations, and he had said that, we're ready to move on a 3-bill package. And he wants to do that before the end of this month.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the Senate wants to move on 5 bills. And among those 5 bills, they haven't really issued specifics, but between reporters and gathering information, we're all pretty much understanding that it's like a labor, health and human services bill and a defense bill. Those are the 2 most contentious bills that appropriators have to pass. They want to include, the Senate wants to include those bills in any package that they're doing.
Yeah.
The problem is that they aren't agreed on those top line numbers, because you have to match up the amount of spending they want to do in the House and the amount of spending they want to do in the Senate, get to an agreement, send it to Trump.
Yeah.
And so the problem is that in the Senate, they want to do this, and it's a very lofty goal. Cole is more optimistic of, like, well, hey guys, we're not even in agreement on some of these bills. if I try to bring a 5-bill package to the floor, the Freedom Caucus is going to say it's an omnibus, and they hate omnibuses, and they're going to have an omnibus and a CR. And so I think that there's just a lot of problems that appropriators are having right now, and there is that lack of trust. And Cole had said that he's in regular communication with Democrats. I mean, him and Rosa DeLauro have a great relationship.
Yeah.
Probably arguably one of the best bipartisan relationships on the Hill.
I'd be interested to see how, I don't think that they've been talking as much. Like we said, there hasn't been movement.
Yeah.
I think that it's been tough.
They might be talking. I don't think that the House and the Senate are talking very much.
I think that it's just been different to how we've been seeing appropriations or reporting on it the rest of this year.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting seeing closer to the deadline how they work together, what it ends up being. We'll have a lot to talk about in January.
We'll have a lot to talk about in January, and that's, I think, the problem is that we've seen this kind of time and again, that appropriations keeps getting shifted to the very last minute.
Yeah, always does.
And I think that this shutdown made things very hard for a lot of reasons because it pushed the deadline to January 30th. So they avoided a December 30th deadline.
Thank God.
Thank God. But also, just because they moved it to January doesn't mean that they're not still jamming people by the holidays, because it is the holidays and they want to move on stuff, because if not, when they come back they already miss out on the first few days of January, and they may still need to address healthcare, and maybe the stock trading discharge petition will hit 218. And I've had some members tell us that, appropriations is the number one priority, but when there's all this noise about everything else, by the time it's going to be like January 15th, we're going to have nothing done. And then once again, we have, 7 business days to pass these bills when we could have just been digging our heels in and doing it in December. And so I think that there's just like not a lot of, and the shutdown just also like eroded any sort of confidence that Democrats have in Republicans wanting to negotiate in good faith, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I don't think January 30th is going to be as messy as we saw in September and October. But I do think that, it's not going to be smooth sailing.
Yeah. Well, good thing we talked to a handful of members about that at Media Row. So up next, we have an interview with Congressman Blake Moore and Congressman Reps McCormick. So we'll just jump right into Utah. Utah is one of the many states looking at redistricting. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that redistricting looks like? And then also, are you concerned that redistricting is going to have this cycle every year now? I think that is a concern of a lot of members, both Democrats and Republicans, that now that we open this can of worms, it's just going to happen every midterm cycle.
Yeah, no, I'm very concerned about the constant, perpetual nature of redistricting. The norm was every 10 years, and it was part of the decennial, census process, and we need to stick to that. And candidly, that's something that we got to get back to. This is becoming this wildfire that every single state now, and you do it, and you do it, and you do it. It's a race to the bottom, in my opinion, and we should redistrict every 10 years based off census data, and keep it to that.
So the RSC is looking at bringing forward a Reconciliation 2.0 bill to follow the Big Beautiful Bill. What are your thoughts on that, and what is the probability that is going to pass in a midterm year?
Small. Let's be realistic. We just had a very, very contentious Big Beautiful Bill, which I thought was great. It had so many great things in it that business owners and Americans could love. Thinking about a second reconciliation, I love it. I'm high hopes, but I think we have to pick our fights very carefully, because we have some big issues to tackle, like healthcare, for example, the biggest cost to Americans, the biggest cost to government, the biggest inflationary cost we have, the second biggest cost to businesses. That's probably something we need to drill down on, because that's going to be a big midterm item.
The American people don't want excuses out of Congress, so there's other stuff to do. They work incredibly hard, and we need to work just as hard, if not harder, to make sure that we accomplish some of these things. Interesting point. It is uniquely tough to do 12 simple appropriations bills that basically are almost the same each year over year. There's not a lot of variation between them each year. It's ridiculous that it's become such a political firestorm to do it. Think about what we just accomplished, though, with respect to the first reconciliation. That tax policy that we enacted and we made permanent back on July 4th, that didn't expire till the end of this year, the end of December. We got that done 6 months before that deadline of tax, the 2017 tax reform expiring. That's a significant thing, and I hope that Americans can kind of look at that and say, hey, At least the Republicans got that done, not only on time, but well in advance of when that calamity would have hit. If we would have gone into this January knowing that all of those positive pro-growth tax policies that we enacted in 2017 were no longer, like, that would have been really treacherous for our economy. But now we have certainty, we have permanency in that, and it's a really positive thing. With regards to another reconciliation bill, healthcare and trade are two of my top priorities, and I would love to see us be able to work on some of that stuff. Candidly, so much of that is bipartisan. This is where you get to really see what the Democrats are made of. Are they going to vote against things like PBM reform or good, strong HSA, health savings account policy, when they've, in previous Congresses, already voted for it? Are they going to vote against it now just because they want to carry on this message of blaming healthcare on Republicans?
What is the Republican solution to healthcare? That's a big question, but it's what everyone's asking right now.
So I'm going to be vague because there's no consensus. But deregulation, making it more competitive. When you have more competition, it drives the price down. I'll give you a perfect example. First of all, we use our insurance for far too much. If you use car insurance to change your car oil, to change your blinker, to do anything that goes wrong in your car, can you imagine? Because you'd always use it, right? How expensive would your car insurance be? You couldn't afford it. It'd be tens of thousands of dollars per year at least. It'd be actually your health care because that's how much you'd use it. And your car oil change would cost hundreds of dollars. Why? Because it's paid for by insurance. They got to take their percentage and the administrative fees on that. Healthcare is about 25% administrative fees. In today's day and age of AI, there should be penalties when a health insurance company doesn't pay what they're supposed to pay. They deny a third of all claims, despite having EMR system, electronic medical records, that cost hundreds of millions per hospital system, with scribes, with coders, with me spending hours after my shift. They still deny a third of the time and dare you to take them to court because they know you're not going to most of the time. So they get away with that. And they're making record profits, 230% more than they made in net profits before the Affordable Care Act. And your premium's gone up almost 90%. So are we fixing the problem by giving them extra money? No, you're sustaining the Affordable Care Act's problems. Look at the biggest recipients for healthcare industry dollars. Raphael Warnock, Georgia, in a swing state, by the way. Biggest recipient for healthcare dollars in 2020, the last time he was up for election. You watch. Democrats aren't for the American, they're for big business. They're for whoever puts money in their coffers, and then they can pretend like I'm taking care of Americans by spending more American money. And where do you think that money's paid for? Your kids, who are going to pay interest on that small supplementation that's going to only benefit a few people for $1.5 trillion while insurance companies make record profits. How do we solve the problem? We need to have something competitive. You're never going to repeal and replace, not with a 60-vote margin that you needed in the Senate. So let's come up with something that's an alternative, that's competitive, that drives the prices down naturally, where we use it for catastrophic insurance. Like Senator Cassidy actually has a pretty good bill. Very interesting things like that.
We also have another government funding deadline come up. I know that you are very passionately against CRs. We did get a CR to get to this January 31st deadline. What do you think is going to happen with that government funding? Are these 9 appropriations bills going to pass, and would you support another CR if necessary?
The 9 appropriations bills already have passed. We have 3 more to get done. That's the big question. Will we pass those? Those are the contention ones. Those are the ones that I'm worried about. We haven't done that in a very long time. And people are talking about the second reconciliation package. High hopes, but I understand the realities. I don't want to shut down the government.
Here's the big folly of what we just went through with the longest shutdown in history. That was simply just a messaging opportunity for the Democrats. They've already voted for that funding level numerous times. Every Democrat senator that voted against that for the votoramas that they did 12, 15 times, they've already voted for that exact level of funding. That's the irony. The deal is we have another deadline at the end of January, but Democrats had realized, okay, we're going to make a healthcare message. We're going to use the shutdown as our vehicle to get that message out so that it catches awareness, and then we're just going to constantly blame the Republicans on the cost of healthcare. And that's just not true. It's not accurate. It's not why healthcare premiums go up and everything. People understand that, and they're starting to. Subsidies are just bad. The Obamacare subsidies are just bad for affordability, right? That's a simple economic fact. But the Democrats really wanted that moment to be able to message on healthcare. Why? For the 2026 midterm elections. That's going to be the message that they carry forward. They don't need that anymore in January. They feel like they probably got that with the longest in history. So I think there'll be some good agreements. We'll get these remaining 9 bills done. There's 12 total appropriations bills. We got 3 of them done a few weeks ago, and I'm pretty confident we can get the other 9 done before the end of January. It would be a travesty to go to another, extended time frame CR. I hope we can avoid that. It's in the order of bad decisions. Like CR is like in the middle. The worst decision is going to a shutdown or a prolonged shutdown. CRs, I can't stand them, but it's better than going to a shutdown. We just need to get the bills done.
I hate CRs, but I hate shutdowns even more. And we need to do probably something to make sure that the people who do come to work get paid. Since they're going to get paid anyways, this is just a political game we play from the minority standpoint to force a tyranny of the minority. And that tool needs to be taken out of the toolbox. We need to pass something in Congress and make sure the military and people who are coming to work get paid. If you come to work, you should get paid. That's a fair thing. Most Americans would say, yeah, I'm for that. Let's pass that.
And then lastly, following the shooting in D.C. of 2 National Guard members, do you think that Congress needs to take some of that power back? I've talked to some members about some movement that Congress can make to assist in a federal takeover from President Trump. Do you have any thoughts on that, or any thoughts of what Congress could do to prevent things like that?
Well, look, it's just a tragedy that this happened. That young lady that lost her life, and while he's recovering, he's in critical condition. It's tough, and these are moments to reflect on the importance of our military, the importance of deterrence, and hopefully, we can always look at it. It's always Congress's job to make sure that we're working in a co-equal branch of government type of opportunity. And there's a lot of things that we do that the administration is deferring to us, and hopefully some things that are more traditionally, our responsibility that the executive branch is doing. We want to make sure that, we push that even more. So I'm a big supporter of our Article 1 and doing as much oversight as possible, and this is no different.
That's why we've taken away the horrible leadership of people like Marion Barry, where we've been able to take away horrible efforts by the judicial system to not prosecute criminals. That's why we had a huge problem with murder. The average murderer in D.C., I think, had been released from jail, 7 times? The average person. We corrected that. We went after those sort of things. The safety of this populace is in our hands. It's not just the president. It's Congress. We are an equal branch of government, not an inferior branch. We are equal. We need to grab that power back. We need to assert what's good for the American people. It shouldn't always be driven by the executive branch. It's the easiest way to do it, but not the best way to do it.
So how do you grab that power back?
First, by the REINS Act, which I think the president, I hope, would be in favor of, because it's always great when you have a president. President Trump is great for me. I love what he does. The problem is President Trump won't be president 3 years from now. So do I want to take the chance that a Democrat president can undo everything that he's done, that they can promise the people money that they don't have, that we don't have? Do I want a president who's going to reverse course on everything that we've done that's good for the military and destroy our recruiting efforts and our strategy, our meritocracy? No, I don't. I want to make sure that we limit presidential power so that when we're not in power, it's not burdensome to the American people, because there's a lot of bad presidents out there in the next few generations that are going to happen. We want to make sure that we don't have a tyranny of a president who does the wrong things.
Welcome to our Q&A section, our favorite part. And we have a question from Alexia, and she is asking, what's the likelihood of another government shutdown? Oh my God, don't even say that.
Yeah, we definitely don't want them. I know that really nobody wants them. We've talked to a lot of Republicans this week who are like you'll see, or you saw, Reps McCormick and Blake Moore, they hate CRs. That's one of the first things I remember about reporting on Congress was covering a government funding fight and then being so against a continuing resolution. But they were like, as much as we hate a continuing resolution, we hate a government shutdown more. And like we've talked about, Democrats fought hard in the last government shutdown. Those Affordable Care Act tax credits expire at the end of this year. That's what they were fighting for. That's off the table. come January.
Yeah.
I think that the appetite for another government shutdown when things like SNAP are funded, when 3 appropriations bills have already passed, is going to be so much less that, in my opinion, I don't foresee another government shutdown. I think that it would be problematic and just like they have a lot to do that would never get done. People are campaigning. Who wants to campaign during another government shutdown with midterms 10 months away?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think that the campaign season also alters the party's strategy.
Totally.
Because what we saw in the last government shutdown is Speaker Johnson kept his members out of the House for 54 days. And he said, we've done our job, they're out, we're going to be in our districts. Democrats were in between their districts and in D.C., and they were saying, Republicans are on vacation. If there was another shutdown, Johnson would have to make a decision. Do I keep my members out and have them in their districts campaigning like I did last time? Or do I force them to stay in D.C. to be like, no, this is our priority, like we are in campaign season, but the quicker we get this done, the quicker, we're done. Yeah. But I think that strategy could either totally work or it will totally fail. Yeah. And it really just depends on how the information gets out to voters, because again, like what you said, SNAP is off the table. Payment for House and Senate employees and other federal government employees are off the table. Healthcare is still going to be an issue, but it's not like there's a hard deadline anymore like there was. With all those things off the table, I don't know if voters are going to feel the impact of another shutdown as heavily as they did in this past few months.
I wouldn't be surprised if, way less people would know about it. It would be a partial shutdown instead of a full shutdown. And the people who do know about it, I think they would just be annoyed. They'd be like, we are doing our jobs, so you need to do your jobs. I don't think at this point they would really care what each party has to say. I think that the people who do know about it are just going to be annoyed that it's happening. Yeah. I think it's a lose-lose situation for both parties if they do enter another shutdown, but I do think that the probability of it is much smaller than we saw back in September.
Yeah, and I think that Democrats and Republicans don't have a lot of faith in each other right now. But I think at the same time, everyone is so exhausted from what happened that I think that now the appropriators are at least understanding that we need to get it together and we need to get these bills across. And that's why, Cole was saying, let's move on the bills that we do have, because then come time if there's a CR in January, at least we now have, 6 out of the 12. Yeah. That's half. And we saw that a few fiscal years ago when they had passed 6 appropriations bills and they did the remaining 6 in the Continuation Appropriations Act. Or it wasn't even that. It was just it was a pretty large omnibus that just did all of them. And, conservative Republicans weren't super pleased with that. They never are. It's very hard to please conservative Republicans with appropriations. But I think that is a much better scenario than we were, and that's what a lot of appropriators have said. We already have 3 on the table. There's 9 left, 2 of which are super contentious. At least 3 of them are pretty easy and
pretty much done.
Low risk caliber. And so I think that the only thing right now that is giving people kind of PTSD from the shutdown is the fact that we're in the second week of December. Yeah. And there's been no movement at all. Yeah. I think that people are getting antsy about it, but I think that there's no reason to panic right now. I think that panicking just incites just conflict. So I think that the time to panic is January 20th.
I also think that they have bigger fish to fry next year.
So much bigger fish to fry. Literally the control of the House. So I think that there's more on their minds than another shutdown.
Yeah. But we'll be watching it closely for y'all, and that's a wrap. Thanks for watching Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
And as always, make sure to like and subscribe, and to follow us on our X accounts, on our Instagram, Capital Combos, and read at WashingtonExaminer.com.